everything we will be doing. Camera controls are pretty standard. We can zoom, we can rotate, we can move around using the mouse or using the keyboard. It gets more interesting once we have some objects on the table. So I can pick these up with my cursor, I can throw them around, and as you can see, there's a physics simulation behind it. So everything moves as you would expect it on a real table as well. Now, there's a couple of things we can do with our objects. Of course, we can rotate them in different directions. We can move them up or down, and we can also put them back where we picked them up, or pick up additional objects quickly as we move them along. And yeah, we can also select many objects at once. And there's a couple of ways of quickly zooming into things. So there's a quick zoom button that zooms at different parts of the table, and an object zoom where you can quickly look at the objects that you're pointing at. Then there's a chat functionality. So here you can talk to other players that are within the same room, so that have joined your game. This is not a global chat functionality just for this particular game, and there's also a voice chat and a team voice chat. If you have teams set up in your game, then you can both talk to all players at once, or just the players within your team. All right, this is, I got a small achievement here, nice. This is already it for the basic tutorial that just teaches a bit about basic interactions with objects, but there's a lot more that you can do in the game. So we'll just quickly jump to the intermediate tutorial. And here we'll see a few other objects apart from the most basic ones we just saw. First up are dice. So as you'd expect, you can pick up dice, you can throw them. You'll get tooltips of what has been thrown with a quick sum of them. You'll also see in the chat log if a player has rolled dice, what the result was. So this can help with keeping a log of things and also prevent any kind of cheating. Then, yeah, there's a number of things we can do. If you rotate dice, we rotate them along their axes. We can put them to particular numbers. And moving on, we have containers. So these chests here can contain other objects. You can take some here, throw them into the chest, and pick them out again. And these containers can have various properties. For example, this one is a random. This is an infinite random. So here I put 5 objects in, I get 5 objects out. If I put these 2 here in, I will always get one of the 2 out randomly. And there's other things like a queue or a stack. So a couple of different ways how you can set up your container objects. Moving on, well, there's a few more things where you can, for example, insert objects here and also grab directly out of the container in addition to grabbing objects from the table. And yeah, containers are also subject to physics. But we can also, for example, lock them, and now they won't move again, but we can still use them to drag out objects. Then we have these kinds of counters, also called multi-state objects. So these can switch during gameplay. If I right-click on one of these, for example, you see this is now in state 0. I click here, I can change the state, and it moves to different numbers. This also works with the keyboard, and we'll see a few more uses of those later on. And finally, another very important object for board games, of course, are cards. So basic functionality is you can have stacks, you can shuffle stacks, you can split them in various ways, take a few cards from the top, or divide them in many different ways, and take cards from stacks, or take them from the stack. Moving on a bit, there's also things like putting a card below the stack. So you see has moved now not to the top. Going back to the top, I have a different card here. And if I flip the whole thing, the card is at the bottom. Yeah, I've already shown shuffling, and we can also bring up a stack explorer. So this shows me what cards are in this particular stack, and I can also drag them out right here into my world. Next up are card holders. So this is what you usually would use for your hands. So you can see I am the blue player here, and one of the card holders is marked as blue. So this is my hand. And you can also see at the bottom, these are the cards that I have in my hand. Some are flipped. I can change that here. I can rotate them and move them out of the card holder or drop them into the card holder. This one is a card holder that doesn't have any owner, so I can see what cards are on there. This one here on the left is for different players. So this is for the green player. I can see some of the cards are face down, and the other cards here have kind of a blur, so I don't see which cards this player has in their hand. All right, and then there's of course functionality like drawing a card, dealing cards to all players in the game, and so on. All right, I'm a good student. Got the second part of my tutorial achievement here. And we'll move back to the main menu then for the final tutorial on playing functionality. So here are a couple of different objects like we've already seen. For some games, you will want to be able to measure distances on the table. So there's a mode for that. I can activate here using the M key, and I can draw various measurements, 2-dimensional or 3-dimensional. I can also, I think that would be the next thing here, move to a measure movement mode for games where it's important how far you move an object. So when I pick up something now, I can see exactly how far I have moved it. And then there's the different layers. So for some objects like this chessboard, you usually don't interact with them while playing a game. So you can, I've shown it before with the containers, you can lock these objects or put them into ground mode. That means usually you don't interact with them at all. They behave like the table. Physics are off. Your cursor goes on top of them and so on. But you can put your cursor into ground mode as well, which is what I've just done. So now I don't interact with the regular objects here, and instead I can pick up ground objects like the chessboard here. Oop, I pressed the wrong button and accidentally also showed you that you can put a blindfold on, and other players will see that you are blindfolded and so on. What I meant to do, of course, was deactivate the ground mode. All right, let's have a look to remind myself what I wanted to show reading the tutorial here. We can go into the player options. So there's a couple of things I can set about myself here. For example, my cursor mode, we just seen what measure mode does, what ground mode does. I can set the hold height, how high my objects are above the table. This can also be done quickly by control key and mouse wheel. I can switch from the third-person perspective that I now have to more kind of a first-person perspective. I can switch on this card hand or turn it off. And of course, I can switch my player slot or my player color. So as I do this, move to the green slot, you see that this card hand for the blue player now is not my hand anymore. I can't see the cards in there. And the hand on the bottom of my screen also disappeared. As I move back, it's now my card hand again. There's teams, and I can save and load a variety of camera views onto the table quickly. And then, there's things like you would expect, for example, copy and paste, creating any copies of objects quickly, and of course, deleting single objects or a lot of them as well once. And there's a undo and redo functionality here at the top. So if I accidentally deleted a lot of my objects, I can jump back. So what this does is it restores the whole state of the table 10 seconds back. So I could jump forward and back here for a while and see objects disappearing and reappearing as I added or deleted them. Now, apart from the play options, there's also options for the objects. So for example, I can change here a few things. I can name objects, give them a description that would show up in the tooltips. These objects as well, I can change their type to ground or even other collision modes. I can change some of their physical properties and how they sound if they collide with other objects. And I can also change their appearance. So for example, this green cube can become a blue cube, or it could look like a blue metal cube here now. All right, that would be it as a very quick tour of how actual playing the game works, how the controls look like, how the tables look like. So before I move on, do we already have any questions about these functionalities, about the tutorials, and so on?
Yeah, I do have a couple here. Let me read them off real quick. First question, Chad asks, are there any plans to allow people the ability to change the container textures or add images to the faces?
Yes, absolutely. That's already possible. So the model that you've seen, this chest, that's just the default container. You can absolutely create your own containers as well. We'll see that later on in the editor.
Awesome. Next question, can the units be changed for us metric peeps?
Yes, actually the game is pretty much metric, and just the default measure unit is in inches, but just go over here, centimeters, and then you have your measurements in centimeters or millimeters or whatever unit you like.
Awesome. Next question is by Jay Bell. Does Tabletop Playground allow up to 20 players?
I think it's 16 players right now, might even be 20. I'm actually not sure myself. So it's either 16 or 20. You have seen that there's a lot of player slots available here. So it does support quite a few players.
Awesome. And two more questions. Jaxie asks, can we change the size of the table itself?
You can change the table itself. So this is only one table model, and you can also create your own tables in any size and any shape you want.
Awesome. Heather asks, who has access to undo button and adding, deleting objects? Just the host or also the players?
Undo is currently host only, as is, for example, there's also a save state. Yeah, it's disabled in the tutorial, but you can save and load at any time. And any kind of loading and undoing is essentially also loading, is currently host only.
Awesome. I think that's it for now.
All right. And let's exit from here. And now how would we start a game? Very simply. So here, there's only a couple of different options here. We actually have our number of players, currently limited to 16. And name, password. Usually you would keep this off, and then other people can find your game in the server browser. If you turn this direct connect mode on, this is for example, playing on a local network, even without internet connection. I'm turning this on here now, so the game doesn't appear publicly, and we don't have other people suddenly joining us. And now I'll start a chess game. Who wouldn't want to play chess in a dystopian cyberpunk world? So now our game is started, and other players would be able to join us. We can play chess, in this case, in this 3D environment, moving our pieces around, or just throwing everything off the table. But of course, these few classic included games are nice, but we are more interested in more modern games that other people have created. So I'll exit really quickly here right now. So how do I get to custom games made by other people? There's the Browse Games button here. If you do this the first time, you'll get a little question here from Steam asking you to connect your Steam account to mod.io. Mod.io is the service that we use to host player-made games. If you're familiar with the Steam Workshop, it mostly works in a very similar way. So now I am on the Tabletop Playground space on mod.io, and we can see the many different games that people have already created. We can also see the buttons here. The red button is a subscribe button. So if I subscribe to a game, it will be downloaded automatically, and it will also be kept up to date. So if the author uploads a new version, the game will notice that and will automatically update it. I have already subscribed to a few different games, and for example, I can subscribe to our chess AI scripting example here. And if I do that, looking up here, this is the mod.io panel, and it will see that I have subscribed and will download the new mod, or usually it will, but right now it doesn't. Or it already has in the background. Let's see, but that's in general how it works. So you subscribe from in-game or also from your browser. So this is just a website that you can go to with your regular browser as well. Log in, and then I see what's happening. For some reason, I'm with a different user because I switched users before the presentation. Steam still thinks I'm a different user and has me logged in as someone else here, so that's why it doesn't happen. All right. Okay, so this is how you get to games by other people. Now let's go into the editor and show you a bit how you can create your own games. But before we do that, perhaps a bit of time if there are any more questions in the meantime.
Yes, we do have a couple in chat. First question is by Heather. How do you get things back when they fall off the table?
You can pick them up again, essentially. So there's, you've seen the floor, and you can just get them from the floor again. There's a border around the playing area, so they can't just fall off into infinity.
Awesome. Next question is by Chad. Is there a way for the monetization of games, or are they all free?
Currently, they're all free, but that is actually one of the main reasons why we are using mod.io and not the Steam Workshop. Apart from not being tied to Steam forever and having the ability to go to other platforms in the future, the other big advantage of mod.io is that they will in future allow monetization of mods on the platform as well. Their goal is to have that available later this year.
Awesome. Next question is by Jay Bell. It looks like snap points can be aligned on many different points on the same object. Can you show us a bit of how that works?
Yeah, when we go into the editor, we'll talk a bit about snap points as well.
Awesome. Last question is by Saskia. What are the unique selling points compared to existing tabletop simulators?
Mm-hmm. So one is what we haven't really seen yet. The editor works a bit differently, and your whole packages are organized in a much more creator-friendly way, I would say. Then, as we've already talked about, mod.io in the future will have monetization, while the game itself will not be a subscription model, so it will stay with a single price. You don't have to pay any subscriptions. And we have a couple of other features like pretty good VR support, which I won't show here today, but that's been something that we've thought about from the beginning, so it's very well integrated. When I'll only touch a bit on the scripting functionality, but this is done in JavaScript, which is something that many people are already familiar with. And compared to other platforms, it's already integrated a bit differently and should be much easier and much more comfortable for many people to use.
Awesome. I think we have one more question here. Is there a way to add UI elements in the sides or the top of the screen, like how it's on TTS, for quick access of settings or save files?
So the UI, well, I haven't shown a few things in the UI. Maybe I should do that. There's a bit less UI compared to TTS, for example, in general. So what you have is a few things here that you can pop out. On the top is the player list. The chat we've already seen. And here is kind of a input guide. So this is context sensitive. Right now it shows me a few things that I can do with the keyboard because there's a lot of different keys on the keyboard that you can freely configure, but probably not remember all that easily. So this is here to help you and shows you right now, okay, I can press G to move into ground mode, press G again to move back to regular cursor, and as I move on objects, I always see what are the kind of actions that I can do right now. So this can help me remember much better how to use the keyboard to quickly access actions. Other than that, apart from this at the top, we have a really minimalistic UI. But there's a space here left, so as we add more tools, more cursor functions, we will probably use this as a toolbar space here as well to quickly switch between some of the functionalities that we have.
Awesome. I think that's all the questions we have for now.
All right, then let's jump into the editor. So we've seen we can load up a game that we got from mod.io, but how does such a game look like? What does it contain? I've created something here already that is named Workshop, and we can also see the other packages I have downloaded from other people that I could open up in the editor as well, or first copy to make my own version of it and then open up. Opening up this, let's have a quick look at the anatomy of such a package. So in the end, a package in Tabletop Playground is just a folder that contains your resources, the definitions of your objects, and your saved states, so like the table setups. So you can see various folders here. I don't use any special fonts here, but I have two different models, 3D models. I have a script here, not using sounds, but a couple of different textures. And this is something we'll now use and also fill with some of the objects that we are going to generate. So let's jump in here. Right now, I don't have any objects within this package, so let's create a new one. And here we can see all the different object types, most of which we've already seen in the tutorials. So I'll just start up with something generic, which can be anything like a chess piece or many other things. And these always start up with a 3D model file. So let's just take our sphere here. All right, now we have a sphere. We can look at it from different angles, but it looks the same from all angles, so not very spectacular. There's a lot of intimidating options around here. We won't go into all of them, but there's lots of things that you can now set and do and customize about this little sphere here. So for example, we could go and customize its appearance, make it metallic, make it really shiny, and make it pink. So now we have a nice pink metallic sphere here. Let's name it as well. Save it. Going back, another achievement. Nice. There's our sphere. And now we can switch, for example, to a different model. Let's take a cube. Okay, we have a big metallic pink cube. Let's make that a bit less shiny and a bit less spectacular for now, and look at the other options that we have. So next is a texture. Will be pretty familiar to most people who have ever worked with 3D programs. So let's go for our cube texture here. Not a very interesting texture, but we can see now some of our cube faces have gotten a color. So if we go back to our textures folder, this is just the texture that I've just applied. Now the next option here is a normal map. That will also be familiar to people who are familiar with 3D games or 3D programs. A normal map is something you can add to your models to give them a bit more detail, to make them appear like they have more geometry than they actually have. So we have a normal map here, and if we look at it, now we have some structure on this surface here and on the surface below. Now the next one is where it gets a bit more interesting and also a bit more unusual. So this extra map is something that's particular to Tabletop Playground. And you can do a couple of different things with it. Most importantly, it defines where colors should end up. So I go to the tooltip here. Instead of using this as a picture, we use the different color channels within this image, so the red channel, green, blue, and also the alpha, the transparency channel, to tell the game about different properties. So, for example, we can see here the red channel will determine where the primary color, the one that we can set above here, will end up on our object. And similarly, the green channel determines where the secondary color ends up. So, if I now use one of these, where I did cube extra, a few things have happened. Let's move that away for now. So we now have both these colors available. If I change my primary color, you can see that this changes now only the upper part of my cube. And if I change the secondary color, we have another face of the cube that is now affected by this color. And this can also be changed within the game. So I now have an object that has these two different colors on different parts of it and can be modified at any time. And then there's also two more channels. So effectively, we can also say where the roughness and the metallic parts of the object change. So if I this up and this here, you can now see that there's part of the object that now looks metallic. I think we have it somewhere else as well. So there's a lot of interesting effects that you can achieve with this additional texture map here. All right, let's save our object as a cube. Back here, you can see our two objects, and let's move on. For example, to a game board. So usually you have some texture for your board. Let's take a world map here. And this is just a quick way of creating a game map, a game board, sorry. We can see here we have a frame as well. It might be a bit too high in this case, so just make that only 0.5 centimeter thick down. And this is now, again, it's just a generic object. So all the options we've had before, normal maps, texture maps, extra maps, and so on, we still have here. And this is actually composed of two different models. See? One is the surface of the game board itself, and the other is this wooden body. So I could move that to show it. I have these two models that make up my one object, and if I don't want the wooden frame, I can also just delete it, leaving me with just this. And again, I can play around a bit with the sliders here, for example, to give me kind of a bronze look of this map. So that's a quick way to create your game boards. Let's save this as well. And perhaps as we already had a question about snap points, Game boards would be a typical objects where you want to place snap points. So there's a control here where you can add snap points in a couple of different ways. The most obvious one would be just with your mouse cursor. So Europe, Asia, Africa can now snap. We can now have objects to snap to these exact locations. Often you don't really want to place your snap points freely, but you have some kind of regular grid that you want to snap to. So there's a functionality for that here. You can add a whole snap grid to your objects, both rectangular or hexagonal. And then you have many options how big this should be, how many cells you have, and so on. So this allows you to pretty quickly create many snap points that are then attached to your objects. Snap points also have a property to allow you to snap to a particular rotation. So usually they will just snap the location of an object, but you can also determine where the snapped object should rotate towards. All right, that's it on the snap point tools. Then going back, we now have our game board and can move on to the next object type, which would be an image shape model. So often you don't really have 3D models available, but you do have an image maybe that shows you, like with a meeple here, how your three-dimensional objects should look like, kind of a cutout. So just so happens I have a meeple image ready here, and I can create my object from it. So this was a red meeple texture, this one. So we now have this red here, and we can use the color to color the side of the object. And again, we have all the flexibility. This is just a generic object. We can add further models. We can add further image shapes. So I could move this by a few centimeters to the right, and then why not add a second meeple? This now ends up a bit differently by default. Would rotate it and scale it a bit so it looks the same like the other. And I can determine for each of my models if I just want to use the color that the whole object has, or if this particular model now should look different. And I can use either more image shapes here or more models, and I could use other shapes as well. I can have holes, multiple holes within holes, and so on. All that is no problem. All right, that's now our ring meeple. Before moving on, any questions on the objects that we've created so far?
I don't have any questions on the objects. Well, actually, I do have one question for myself. So the ring meeple that you created, are those two objects attached like permanently, or can they be separated in game?
These are now permanently attached. So this is in-game, this is one object.
I do have a question, actually. Sorry, I wasn't quick enough to type. You know that ring object that you created? Does it actually have a hole within it for the physics? Like, can you put things within that hole?
You can. So we haven't looked at these colliders here, but so right now the collision looks like this by default, but we can change that if we want as well. So instead of just using the auto-generated cubes around our objects, I could go and do an image shape here as well, take the ring and rotate that. And, okay. On the ring, this is actually not possible. So for colliders, you have one important limitation if you're talking about physically movable objects. So this is not the case for tables, but for anything that has physics, you need to have generally convex shapes. This is a technical limitation of the physics engine. These image shapes in general allow you to have concave colliders as well by decomposing them automatically into convex colliders, but this doesn't work with an actual ring. So if I had something like a circle with a dent, this would be possible. A complete hole as a collision does not work in this case.
Awesome. We have a couple questions in here, but I think a couple of them I want to save for later because they're not specifically on 3D models. One question that did come up, though, is by Jexy. Can we make meeple mounts?
Sorry, I didn't get that.
Can we make meeple mounts, like a mount for your meeple?
Yes, of course. You could, so for example, you could have a snap point on your mount and then place your meeple on top of that. And when you move your mount in game, the meeple on top of it will automatically move with it.
Awesome. I think that's it on 3D modeling for now. I think we may have a couple other questions being typed out, but we can come back to those. I know we're kind of running short on time here.
I see that I'm not as quick as I thought I would be. Let me quickly see if I want to jump a few things. Yeah, let's jump the dice. Those are mostly like models, but go to the cards at least. So how would we create a card deck? I've now taken, this is the texture that I'm using for the cards. Okay, we can see it all here. It's not quite what I wanted. First, it looks a bit stretched. So it's this, we can show the texture here. This is what it looks like. Let's press this button to automatically put this into the same aspect ratio. Okay, it's a start, but now we have 10 by 10. So let's type here. We have 10 horizontal, 10 vertical. Okay, this looks better. Now I have one card. And I can create more here. So this is how I would go through my deck. In this case, create up to 100 cards. We don't do all of them right now. And I can, for each of those cards, of course, also pick some other part of the image, either like this or directly on the image. Tell each of the cards within my deck here what they should be. And as I add more cards, it becomes larger. We have top and bottom of the deck. Right now, our back of the cards looks just like the 0, so we can have different options here as well. For example, a separate file. Let's take this boom texture. Now this is the back of our deck, this is the front, and we have 20 different cards in there. So that's very quickly of how you would create card decks. Let's save that, and just as a quick one, you can, even for cards, you can do image shapes as well. So I can have my card deck in a boom shape if I want. Save that. Then we have tiles and tokens, which are also very frequently used in games. And in Tabletop Playground, they essentially are almost the same as cards. So they have all the features of cards and are created in the same way. So I could create a little boom token here. And this will give me a token that I can now use within the game. See, this also can have, this could have the full precise collision, except for the hole here. And there's a couple of different options apart from the size. We can allow this to stack or not. We can allow it to use with card hands or not. For whole stacks, we can allow flipping cards within the stacks or not. We can use this blur that we've seen as the hidden type, or we can use images as hidden types. So there's lots of different options for you when creating a card or when creating card-like objects like tiles, tokens as well. Let's name this All right. And, well, there's a few more here, like cardboard figures, which are also essentially a quick way of turning your 2D images into 3D objects. And again, you can use image shapes. They will be turned into objects. You can have holes and anything you want. This is our figure now. Finally, multi-state objects, we've seen them. They also created similarly to cards, in that we also have these images with all of our different states. And just as I did with a card, I just type out how many states I have in the image, and then I can add them here, as many as I want. And we also can create PDF files. So if I want to read about physics and philosophy in game, I can do that now with this book object. This is also a multi-state object, and again, we have the full flexibility. We could even use an image shape on a PDF. We can add models here if we want. We could add a book model around this PDF, and so on. So anything can be combined here, just as we've had with the generic objects. All right, and yeah, we can create tables. These are essentially the same as our other objects as well. So quickly creating, what does that look like? Well, not quite what we want. Let's do regular cube texture then. It's a table, so we'll make it a bit bigger. And tables work just like, or are created just like other objects as well. The only real difference for tables is that you can have actual precise collision for them. So the collision can be exactly like the 3D model. And that is because a table never moves in the game. So technically it works a bit different as from the physics-enabled objects. Okay. Then perhaps before we move on to further questions, how do I create a table state now? So I would go into the preview mode here, start with an empty table. Let's take the nice cube table we've just created, pick out environment, and then start from the object library here, moving our objects onto the board, onto the table, snapping our sphere to our board. Save this into our workshop. And now if we out here and go back to the main menu, we can now go and load a game for our workshop package, start state. Automatically we'll get into the same environment, and here is our game. So this is how you go from essentially 0 to a full game with a full start state ready for you to play. All right, I would have a couple of things more, but let's go to questions now.
Sure. I'm going to run through we have quite a few. Okay, so let's see here. Starting with Heather, is there a way to make a game you've created public to play, but not possible for others to edit?
Somewhat. So we have, let's go to the editor. This is something I haven't shown yet. How would you upload? There's a button here, upload package. That can upload your package to mod.io. And I could switch off this allow copying here. Switching on private now. And we'll take a texture for our thumbnail and start the upload. So what this does is pretty limited. It's mostly a signal to other players that you don't want your stuff to be copied. directly. Usually the editor will allow you to just copy a whole package that someone else has created, or copy single objects out from other packages, so you're free to mix and match and create it. Well, what happened here? Well, would need to have a look. And pick out that directly in the editor. If you switch off the allow copying here, then that won't be possible. But the files are not encrypted, so if someone is determined to get to your stuff, your files, then they can still go into the folder and get them. When we move to monetization, we'll also look into ways of having a bit more copy protection as well.
Awesome. Chad asks, does Tabletop Playground provide a handful of generic models, or do we have to source them ourselves?
There's a handful of things that you can use. So we go just start some game. This is the default library. So there's a couple of game boards, there's dominoes, dice of all standard shapes. There's the chess and the standard playing cards, standard card holders, and then a couple of like a meeple, a pawn, a few tokens. So there's a few objects that are in, but not like a huge library.
Awesome. Daniel asks, can I change the thickness of tokens?
Yes, absolutely. You can change them to any size you want.
Awesome.
Of cards as well.
Oh, cool. Jaxie asks, can you edit text on cards within Tabletop Editor, or do we have to use third-party image editors to make our cards and import them?
Yeah, this is currently not possible. So it's always importing textures, images. So that part would be done in an external program.
Awesome. Greg asks, if I update a model asset or texture asset, say for cards, how does Tabletop Playground update those assets in my games? Do I need to manually force an update, or will Tabletop Playground see that an asset has changed? Can asset links be to Dropbox or any URL, or do they need to be local files?
So assets are always local files. The idea is that a package stays together and is not distributed all over the internet. That means you have all of the files for your package on your computer, and then you upload it to mod.io as one package. So it's essentially a zip file containing all the assets, all the definitions within your package. If you update something in your package, you just re-upload it, and mod.io then has a new version available for players. And by the way, if you go into the server browser, probably we won't see there's something about Twilight Imperium. We can't download that right now because it's a private package that people are just developing. But this one, for example, if you want to join a game with a package that you don't have yet, you don't need to find it on mod.io. You can just press this download button and it will start immediately.
Awesome. Daniel asks, can you add vertical snap points to a meeple or figure? So if I wanted to snap a weapon to the figure's hand, for example.
Mm-hmm. It would work. Probably a bit tricky because of the physics. What you can do is, if you are creating your preview game, you can mostly disable physics for all intents and purposes. So this is actually already a bit disabled. What you can do is you do locked physics and always snap. And then while physics still exists, so if I throw this, it's still physically simulated, but if I drop it, it now looks a bit like it was physics, but it's actually just moving to the below point. And whenever something is at rest, it won't have physics anymore. It won't move. It won't be moved by other objects. And in this way, you can, if you had a snap point for your sword on your meeple, you could snap it to it, and then when you pick up your meeple, you would move both of them, and both of them would snap like this, and the physics wouldn't get in the way. Although some things, okay, with these with these stacks can still be a bit complex.
Awesome. Sorry for the rapid fire questions. We have all sorts of awesome designers here who just want to know more. So David asks, is there a limit to the number of states you can create?
States in the sense of multi-state objects, or in the sense of these game states?
I believe David is referencing game states.
Thanks, Matthew. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no limit. These are relatively small files, and you can have as many of them as you want in your package. Or also locally. So I can, now that I'm in a game, I can save these locally. So these are my local saves. But if you're in the preview mode for your package, you can save them into your package, and there's no limit to them.
Awesome. Chad asks, can you add objects to a game once it's playable? So adding items on the fly.
Yes. So you can go into the object library, and you always have these default packages available. If I had started with with another game now, it would also be here, and I can add more objects. I can even, while I'm in the game, add other packages that are not yet active to the game, and then add things from there. So, for example, these are the air hockey objects here. This just has the limit that all the players will need to have this new package. So, if you want to use something that the other players won't have, they'll get a message that you want to use it and an option to download it quickly. And if everyone does that, or if everyone already has the package, you can even add other packages in a running game.
Awesome. Thank you. Next up, we have Greg's question here. Can you scale objects in a scene game or game mod, or do you have to scale the original objects?
You can do it in the editor, but you can also do it here. We can go to the coordinates here, and that gives us full control over position, rotation, and also scale of the object.
Awesome. Jaxie asks, can we increase the size of the hand tray? As in, can we have different levels within the hand by separating each type of card to have a different draw point?
I didn't quite get the second part, but you can have different. So you can have different sizes and different trays. So by default, there's two different ones, regular one and a large one, which have different number of cards then can go onto them. And as you can see here, even as the same player, I can have multiple holders here. Only one of them will be my on-screen hand. So this one now shows I have in hand. This one is still my holder. Other players won't be able to see it, but I don't have it on my screen. And I can have as many holders as I want. And in the editor, I can also create my own holders in any shape or form I want. Not sure if that answers all of the question.
Awesome. Thank you. Next up, Jay Bell asks, migration from TTS was mentioned. Can we see how that works?
Yes, we can. Let's out here. Create a new package for it. So we have a little tool. Let's open up this folder. This is where the game is installed in Steam. There's a tools folder here, and this has a small importer. Bring up now. I'm bringing it over here. So this small program allows you to take what you have in TTS, either as workshop items, as your local saves, or as saved objects, and move that over to Tabletop Playground. First, you select the folder or the package folder where you want it to end up. Then you select what you want to import, and then you hit import. This one was pretty quick. Let's also do another one. Why not this one? All right. And then you can refresh here. And these are now all the objects that were in the original save files in TTS. So these are the voxel chess objects, and these are from Pixel Towers. So it will do its best to to automatically bring over all the resources, all the textures and model files, and also automatically define the right objects for you. And it can do that for reasonably well for most of the things you would find. What it can't do is scripts, of course, and it won't bring over the table setup itself. But you'll have all your objects and you'll have all your resource files ready for you in the package.
Awesome, thank you. I think that's all the questions we have in chat for now.
All right, then perhaps one last functionality that I haven't really touched upon is the scripting. So let's go back to our workshop package, our start state. So I have one small script prepared here, and I will apply that to an object. Well, why not this one? Going into the properties, I can set an object script. In this case, I have a JavaScript file here. Run it, and we now have, okay, the positioning is not quite right for this object. We have a little hit point counter here. So this adds a few UI elements to this object. I can reduce the hit points, but it also would automatically save them and load the hit points again. And when this goes to 0, the object disappears. So like for other resources, this means we have a script file in our scripts folder in our package. Back to that package. That's the workshop. This is our JavaScript file. Bringing it over here. That's the code for what we just saw. I won't go through it in detail, just to give you an impression what it took to implement that functionality. So there's APIs for many different things in the game. You can move objects, you can find objects. There's zones that we haven't looked at that you can use for various purposes. And you can add UI into the 3D world from scripting, and then react to the players interacting with that UI. To give a bit more complex example, let's use this character sheet, which is one of our tutorials for UI scripting. So this is a somewhat fully functional Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition character sheet that's a bit automated. So if I increase my strength here, you can see that the modifiers that are related to strength will change. I can change my my alignment, my various other properties, and automate things a bit. So usually scripting would be used to do things like game setups, or things like character sheets here. And we have a pretty comprehensive support for it. We have an online API documentation where you can find all the different objects and things available to you. And we have several tutorials in our knowledge base as well, from very basic, how do I get started with scripting at all, even if I don't really know how programming works, up to the more complex things like this one.
Awesome. I don't want to keep you too much longer. I think we have a couple more questions, and then I think we're good to wrap up the workshop, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Awesome. So just to wrap it up, so Heather asks, is there a public place on GitHub or similar where people are sharing scripts they've already created?
Yes. So we have on our Discord, we have a couple of very active members that have also been starting to share their modules. So if you come over here and ask in the scripting channel about it, yeah, you can also already see the last post here is actually a reference to a GitHub project.
Awesome. Jaxie asks, can we make hidden spaces, like in Dungeons and Dragons, where the DM has their own space to roll the dice, and other players cannot see the results unless shown by the DM themselves?
Yes, this is one feature that I haven't shown, which is zones. So pulling up a zone here, and zones can have a couple of different behaviors. So a classic would be object and perhaps also cursor visibility. So I could say now I am the owner of this zone, I as the blue player, and only I can see my cursor and any objects within this zone. And yeah, there's a couple of different things that we can do as well. We can disable snapping or stacking, for example, or even inserting, or disable all interactions, but still allow other players to see what's going on.
Awesome. Sort of coinciding with zones then, David asks, is there an option for a single player to see all hidden things on the table? For example, if I'm running a playtest, I'd like to be able to see all the cards all players are holding.
Mm-hmm. That's actually currently not possible. It's one of the items on our roadmap to have kind of a spectator player slot that would be able to do that. It's not in the game right now.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that's all the questions we have from the Break My Game community for now. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to go through this presentation with us and teach us a little bit more about Tabletop Playground. Was there anything else you'd like to tell us before we wrap things up here?
Well, just thank you for inviting me. It was great showing you around.
Thank you so much. For more information on Tabletop Playground, folks, of course, I know their Discord community is awesome and very active in answering questions. Otherwise, that's it for now. I did record this, so I will have a recording together hopefully by tomorrow. I have a pretty busy day today, but again, thank you so much, and I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day.
All right. Thanks a lot.